Good evening, students. This is Mrs. Lee. I will be reading The Devil and Daniel Webster, Part 2 for you all. While you're reading, please pay attention to the vocabulary and the use of figurative language. In this particular episode of The Devil and Daniel Webster, there's a use of foreshadowing. Foreshadowing is a hint to the reader of something that is yet to come in the story, but yet the characters don't really know necessarily that a certain event is going to occur. So we will have some foreshadowing in this selection. There's also a little bit of scary, somewhat creepy instances in this episode too. So sit back and enjoy reading and listening to the text, The Devil and Daniel Webster, Part 2. After that, all of a sudden, things began to pick up and prosper for Jebus Stone. His cows got fat and his horses sleek. His crops were the envy of the neighborhood, and lightning might strike all over the valley, but it wouldn't strike his barn. Pretty soon, he was one of the prosperous people of the county. They asked him to stand for selectman, and he stood for it. There began to be talk of running him for state senate. All in all, you might say the Stone family was as happy and contented as cats in a dairy. And so they were, except for Jebus Stone. And you must have to think at this point, why is he not happy? He's experiencing all the successes in his life. What's going on in his brain to make him not so happy? He had been contented enough the first few years. It's a great thing when bad luck turns. It drives most other things out of your head. True, every now and then, especially in rainy weather, the little white scar on his finger would give him a twinge. And once a year, punctual as clockwork, the stranger with the handsome buggy would come driving by. But the 6th year, the stranger lighted, and after that, his peace was over for Jebus Stone. The stranger came up through the lower field, switching his boots with a cane. They were handsome black boots, but Jebus Stone never liked the look of them, particularly the toes. And after he'd passed the time of day, he said, "Well, Mr. Stone, you're a hummer. It's a very pretty property you've got here, Mr. Stone." "Well, some might favor it, and others might not," said Jebus Stone, for he was a New Hampshireman. "Oh, no need to decry your industry. That means don't make light of your success." "Oh, no need to decry your industry," said the stranger. Very easy, showing his teeth in a smile. "After all, we know what's been done, and it's been according to contract and specifications. So when the mortgage falls due next year, you shouldn't have any regrets." "Speaking of that mortgage, mister," said Jebus Stone, and he looked around for help to the earth and the sky. In other words, he's looking around. "I'm beginning to have one or two doubts about it." "Doubts?" said the stranger, not quite so pleasantly. "Why, yes," said Jebus Stone. "This being the USA, and me always having been a religious man," he cleared his throat and got bolder. "Yes, sir," he said, "I'm beginning to have considerable doubts as to that mortgage holding in court." "There's courts and courts," said the stranger, clicking his teeth. "Still, we might as well have a look at the original document." And he hauled out a big black pocketbook full of papers. "Sherwin, Slater, Stephen, Stone," he murmured. I, Jebus Stone, for a term of 7 years. Oh, it's quite in order, I think." But Jebus Stone wasn't listening, for he saw something else flutter out of the black pocketbook. It was something that looked like a moth, but it wasn't a moth. And as Jebus Stone stared at it, it seemed to speak to him in a small, sort of piping voice. Terrible, small and thin, but terrible human. "Neighbor Stone," it squeaked. "Neighbor Stone, help me, for God's sake, help me." Before Jebus Stone could stir hand or foot, the stranger whipped out a big bandana handkerchief, caught the creature in it, just like a butterfly, and started tying up the ends of the bandana. Sorry for the interruption, he said. As I was saying, Jebus Stone was shaking all over like a scared horse. That's Miser Stephen's voice, he said in a croak, and you've got him in your handkerchief. The stranger looked a little embarrassed. Yes, I should really have transferred him to the collecting box, he said with a simper. But there were some rather unusual specimens there, and I didn't want them crowded. Well, these little contretemps will occur. Contretemps is a word that means quarrel or disagreements along the way. But of course, Jebus Stone is starting to see there's more people in his community that have actually sold their soul to the devil. And he's also beginning to see what could happen to him. Very scary, wouldn't you think? I don't know what you mean by contretemps, said Jebus Stone, but that was Miser Stephen's voice. And he ain't dead. You can't tell me he is. He was just as spry and mean as a woodchuck Tuesday. In the midst of life, said the stranger, kind of pious. Pious means hypocritical. Listen. Then a bell began to toll in the valley, and Jebus Stone listened. When you hear bells toll in early America, that's usually some kind of indication of bad news, and in many cases meaning death. Then a bell began to toll in the valley, and Jebus Stone listened, with the sweat running down his face, for he knew it was tolled for Miser Stevens, and that he was dead. So in other words, that moth must have been the soul of Miser Stevens. These long-standing accounts, said the stranger with a sigh. One really hates to close them, but business is business. He still had the bandana in his hand, and Jebus Stone felt sick as he saw the cloth struggle and flutter. Are they all as small as that? He said hoarsely. Small? Said the stranger. Oh, I see what you mean. Why, they vary. He measured Jebus Stone with his eyes, and his teeth showed. Don't worry, Mr. Stone, he said. You'll go with a very good grade. I wouldn't trust you outside the collecting box. Now, a man like Daniel Webster, of course, well, we'd have to build a special box for him. And even at that, I imagine the wing spread would astonish you. He'd certainly be a prize. I wish we could see our way clear to him. But, in your case, as I was saying, at this point, this is the foreshadowing, a hint of something to come. At the same time, it almost makes you think, is the devil trying to plant something in Jebus Stone's mind? Is there something that the devil wants even more than Jebus Stone at this point? It makes you wonder. But I will go ahead and tell you, this is definitely foreshadowing a hint of a future happening within the story. Put that handkerchief away, said Jebus Stone, and he began to beg, to pray. But the best he could get at the end was 3 years extension with conditions. I need to reread that quote. Put that handkerchief away, said Jebus Stone, and he began to beg and to pray. But the best he could do at the end was a 3 years extension with conditions. So he was able to negotiate a bit with the devil. So that's good that he was able to get a few more years. And maybe that, being able to buy that time, will allow him to think of some way, somehow, to get out of this contract with the devil. But till you make a bargain like that, you've got no idea of how fast 4 years can run. By the last months of those years, Jebus Stone's known all over the state, and there's talk of running him for governor. And it's dust and ashes in his mouth. For every day when he gets up, he thinks, there's one more night gone. And every night when he lies down, he thinks of the black pocketbook and the soul of Miser Stevens. It makes him sick at heart, till finally he can't bear it any longer. And in the last days of the last year, he hitches his horse and drives off to seek Daniel Webster. For Daniel was born in New Hampshire, only a few miles from Cross Corners, and it's well known that he has a particular soft spot for old neighbors. Dun 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 dun. Cliffhanger. I wonder what Daniel Webster will be able to do for Jebus Stone. While I was reading this, I was thinking about the connections to our real world. And I just want to pose a few questions for you. Do you think there's ever a person that feels like maybe they have sold out or sold their soul to the devil to be successful? Do you think there's some instances where people have traded one life for another life? Or maybe they spend too much time being successful that they don't pay attention to what really matters in life? I want you to think about those questions and maybe what this writer, Stephen Vincent Benet, what he's trying to send to his reader. Obviously, or we hope, that there's no individuals really selling their soul to the devil. But, in a sense, people do it every day.